Today I'm gonna show you my 5 favorite transitions in After Effects so you can go viral. Let's go! The first transition I'm gonna show you is this nice mask fading transition. And before we start, my composition size will be 1080 by 1080 with 60 frames per second. To create this animation, we're gonna need 2 clips, and we're gonna start by removing the background from the first one. That's very important because we wanna fit our second clip behind. And to do that, we're gonna select the first clip and then just press Ctrl and D to duplicate it. Then head to the top and select the Roto Brush tool and double click onto the one that we just duplicated. That should give you this preview, and we're gonna have a nice green little brush. This green little brush we can use to hover over our character and then draw out the places that we want to mask out, which in our case is going to be our character. Once you made a selection, you will get this nice purple outline showing you what you have selected. And as you can see, it's not always 100% accurate. As you can see, I have way too much wall inside, and we need this pink outline to only outline our character. To remove a selection, for example this wall, we're going to just hold down the Alt key, which will turn our brush red, and then we can hover over the edges that we don't want. Now just reselect your character and then do that until your entire character is selected and has this nice pink outline. Make sure you do this accurately and that your character is actually outlined, and then we can go ahead and click onto this freeze button. This will just lock all of it in place, which might take a while depending on how fast your PC works. Once we're done, we will get this blue message, and that's our sign that we can close this layer and go back to our main composition. Now if we disable the original layer, you can see we have one that has only our character with a black background, and then a second one that still has our background because we want it to be visible. One small thing I like to do with the Roto Brush is, as you can see when we zoom in, the edges here look very unrefined. That's normal because we're just human and we can't make it perfectly. So what I like to do is go into the Roto Brush and inside of the settings put the feather from 5 up to 15, which will just make it look a bit smoother. Now enable your background, and we have to overlap the second clip because we want them to be visible at the same time. So we're going to select this clip that we want to have pop in and just drag it over until it's also visible. Then we're going to press S on our keyboard and decrease the scaling until it's the right size to fit in our clip. In my case, I'm going to put it to about 43%, which makes it the perfect size to fit it right next to my character right here. Now let's get to the important part, because as you can see, it's still overlapping the shoulder and his forehead, which we don't want. And that's the exact reason why we Roto Brushed our character out, because now we can take this top clip, which is the second one you can see, and just drag it underneath of the one we Roto Brushed out, which will make it overlap with this clip and make it look more like it's blending in. But obviously we don't want the second clip to just plop into our screen, so we're gonna add an animation that slowly reveals it. For that, select the clip, just remember that it's now in the middle and not on the top anymore, and then we're gonna go to the top and select our rectangle tool. Make sure you click down and then select the ellipse tool right here, which is the circle. By selecting that, we can now click onto our composition, then hold down our shift key and drag a little circle that roughly covers the entire space of our clip. Make sure it doesn't cut off any edges. Then press M twice on your keyboard, which will bring up the mask settings. And the first thing we want to do is set a keyframe for the mask expansion right where we want this animation to start, which for me is at the beginning of my clip. Now I'm just going to slowly decrease this value until our clip becomes invisible, which for me is going to be at roughly negative 1050. Now you have to decide where you want your animation to be finished. In my case, I'm going to go for 2 seconds, which means right here, I'm going to reset this value back to 0, which will reveal my clip. And now when you hover over this, you can see we have this round fading in animation. Right now it looks pretty blunt though, and we want to fine up the edges a bit. For that, we're just going to go to the mask feather and put that from 0 up to 150, which as you can see, will just make the edges way more unrefined. One thing you don't want to forget is to select both the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant, and then click on easy ease. That will just make the graph and the whole animation look a bit smoother. Next, we want to add the zooming in animation, and for that, we're going to go to layer, new, and then select null object. Then select all of your 3 clips and use the pick whip tool, which is this little spiral, to drag them onto our null object. This will link them together, and now every change that we make with our null object, for example, if we press S and increase the scaling, it will be equally applied to all of our clips. That makes creating the animation a lot easier. So just go to the beginning where you want the animation to start, set a keyframe for the scaling, and then press P on your keyboard, right click onto the position and click on separate dimensions. Now we can also set keyframes for our position, and these values we're not going to change at all. They have to stay at how they are right now. And then we're going to go ahead to where we want the zoom in to be finished, which like I said is going to be after about 2 seconds. And here we now have to change them. So I'm going to increase my scaling until it's fully zooming in onto my clip. Okay, you should make sure that your clip is completely covering the edge of your composition. And then because my clip is shifted towards the left, I'm also going to increase the X value until it's fully covering my entire composition like this. And because we linked all of our clips to the null object, you can see all of them are zooming in the same way and in the same speed. The only thing that's low-key pissing me off right now is that the character is still visible here. So all I'm going to do is select the top layer, press T on my keyboard, then set a keyframe for my opacity, go a bit ahead to when our animation is over, and put it down to 0, which will make it slowly but smoothly fade out. The next thing you may realize is that our animation looks slow as fuck, and because we don't want to look like goofy CapCut editors, we're going to have to change the graph. For that, select all of the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant, and then click on easy ease. I'm going to start with the X position keyframes, so select them and then open up the graph editor. By changing the graph, we can adjust how fast our animation is moving, and because right now it's very slow, we're going to change the graph so that it's faster. Start by clicking onto the bottom point right here, and then we're going to drag this yellow handle more towards towards the middle for about 50%. Don't go all the way to the right, something like this. And we're going to reverse that for the top one. So drag this one towards the left, again for about 50%, but not all the way. So kind of here. Close the graph editor and then do the same thing for the scaling keyframes. Select them, open up the graph editor, and then start with the bottom one. Just drag that towards the middle, about 50%. And then the top one we're going to drag towards the left for also about 50%. Once that's done, we can close the graph editor and the animation will look way smoother now. But because we are superior After Effects editors, we have to add some more effects to let everyone know we're not goofy CapCut editors. For that, I'm gonna go to the top, click on Layer, New, and then select Adjustment Layer. I'm gonna duplicate it once by pressing Ctrl and D so that we have a total of 2 layers. And I'm gonna cut these to the exact length of my animation. So I'm gonna select my null object, press U on my keyboard, then select all 3 of these layers because past this point we're not gonna need them, and then press Ctrl, Shift, and D to delete everything that comes past here to keep our workspace a bit cleaner. The first adjustment layer we're gonna use for the S shake to bring in a bit more movement. So I'm also gonna cut that about 10 frames after our animation starts. And then I'm gonna go to effects and presets to search for S_shake. If you can't find this inside of your After Effects, join my Discord server. Then I'm gonna drag this on top of the first adjustment layer and set a keyframe for the amplitude right at the beginning. Put the value from 1 down to 0 and then also enable this checkmark that says motion blur. Now we can press U on our keyboard and bring up our keyframes. And the second keyframe I want to place at roughly half of my animation. So you can see this is our entire animation. I'm gonna place it about here and I'm gonna put the value from 0 up to 0.5. Then I'm gonna go to the end where it's supposed to be over and put it back down to 0. Now select all of the keyframes, right click, go to Keyframe Assistant and click on Easy Ease. Open the graph editor and the graph we want to use here is quite different. So select the first one and just drag this handle towards the right. The top one we're going to leave how it is and then we're going to select the one on the right and drag it towards the left in the same kind of way. Leave the top one how it is and then close the graph editor. The second adjustment layer we're going to use to add a blur, which is very important. As you can see right now, our edges look still pretty sharp, and by adding a blur we can kind of hide these. So go to Effects and Presets and search for BBC Lens Blur OBS. Again, if you can't find it, join my Discord server. Drag this effect on top of the top adjustment layer and this time set a keyframe at the very beginning for the iris scale. Put this from 15 down to 0 and put the gamma value from 220 all the way up to 1000. Press U to bring up this keyframe and we're gonna go to the same point where our shake keyframe was created and then put the iris scale from 0 up to 15. Then go to the end of this layer and set the third keyframe again at 0. Select all of them, right click, go to Keyframe Assistant and click on Easy Ease. The interesting part comes now because we wanna kind of combine the two graphs we used so far. For the first part of the animation, which is right here, we're just gonna copy the same graph that we used for our shake. So drag the bottom handle towards the right. And then the second part of this graph, we want to use the animation that we use for our zooming. So we're gonna drag the top handle towards the middle like this, and then the bottom handle also towards the middle like this, about 50%. Close the graph editor because we're not done yet. Next, we're gonna add a solid layer. So head to Layer, New, and then select Solid. Make sure the color is a nice dark red if you want to copy me. If you want to use a different color because you're gay, you can also go ahead and do that. And then you have a red solid layer covering your entire screen. We also want to cut this at the end of our animation so that the rest of our edit is unaffected. And then again, we're going to select the ellipse tool from the top. Similar to before, hold down Shift and then create a nice circle that looks roughly like this. Make it about my size. And then what's very important is that you put it into the center of the screen. How you can do that is pretty simple. First of all, enable the proportional grid by clicking onto this button and then selecting proportional grid. This point right here is marking the center of your animation, and to align our mask with that, we're just going to double click on here and then make sure this point is exactly on the middle of our screen. Once that's done, disable the proportional grid simply by just re-clicking on it, and then we're going to press M twice on this layer to bring up the mask settings again. Start off by inverting the mask. Like before, set a keyframe for the mask expansion and then increase it until our edges are not visible anymore. To make it look smoother, we're going to put the mask feather from 0 to 200, and then again we want to go to the same point where we set our other two keyframes for the blur and shake, and this time decrease our mask expansion until our edges are visible again, something like this. I also don't want them to be so strong, so I'm going to press T on my keyboard and put the opacity from 100 down to 40%. And go to the end. This time increase the mask expansion again until the red layers are not visible anymore. For this animation, we're going to use the same graph that we did for the blur, so Easy Ease the keyframes. Start off with the first one by dragging it towards the right, and don't be confused, the only reason why this graph is upside down is because we reversed the values. And then for the second one, drag the top handle towards the middle like this, and the bottom one also towards the middle like this. Close the graph editor, and now to hide these sharp edges of our clip a little bit more, we're going to go to Effects and Presets and search for Drop Shadow. Drag it on this clip, which is the middle one, and then put the opacity to 100%, the distance to 0, and the softness to 250, which will create a nice nice aura around our clip. What's also very important is that you enable motion blur, which is this box right here, for all of the layers to make it look smoother. Lastly, don't forget to add your high quality color correction, because it will legitimately make your animation look so much better. The next animation I want to show you, I literally use in every single one of my edits, and it's a simple but extremely smooth blur transition. To create this transition, I prepared 2 clips of Joe Goldberg, and the first thing we have to do is create a new adjustment layer. So go to layer, new, and select adjustment layer. Now we're gonna cut this adjustment layer 20 frames before our clip switch, so you can see the switch point as at 45 frames, so I'm gonna cut it at 25 frames. Press Ctrl Shift and D, and then delete everything that comes before here, and then also cut the layer 20 frames after our transition is happening right here. Now we should have this isolated adjustment layer, and we're gonna press Ctrl and D to duplicate it once, because we're gonna need 2 different effects. Let's begin with the bottom adjustment layer. We're just gonna search for S_shake in our effects and presets, and then drag it on top of this bottom adjustment layer. Set a keyframe exactly where the clips cut for the amplitude, and put it down to 0.5, similar to the transition that we did before. But this time we're gonna put the frequency from 8 up to 12, and also again enable the motion blur. Press U, you should see the keyframes, and we're gonna go to the beginning of this adjustment layer and reset this value from 0.5 down to 0. Copy this keyframe by pressing Ctrl and C, and then also go to the end of the adjustment layer and paste it by pressing Ctrl and B. Now we should have 3 keyframes, one with the value 0.5 and 2 with 0. We're obviously gonna change the graph, so select the keyframes and then easy ease. And inside of the graph editor, we're just gonna drag the bottom handles towards the middle like this for both of them, and then the top ones we're gonna leave how they are. As you can see, that gives us this little shake. And next we wanna add the blur. For the blur, we're gonna search BBC Lens Blur OBS again and drag it this time on the top adjustment layer. Like before, put the gamma from 220 up to 1000. We're gonna change the quality from fast to sharp, and then we're gonna open up the iris to put the iris shape from 6 sides to 3 sides. That will give us this very nice triangle shape that we're looking for. To animate it, set a keyframe for the iris scale right at the point where the clips cut. Then go to the beginning and set it down to 0. Copy this keyframe by pressing Ctrl and C, and then also paste it at the end. And for the graph, we want to use the same that we used for the S-shake. So select the keyframes and then easy ease. Open up the graph editor and just drag these bottom handles more towards the middle. You can see now we have these triangles, and to make it look even better, of course, I'm gonna add my glow color correction. Like I said, I use this transition for all of my edits, and it's a must know, so definitely try it out. The next one I want to show you also gained a lot of popularity recently, and it's this hard circular blur. To create this transition, make sure you have your clips ready, and then we're gonna start by creating a new adjustment layer like before. And very important, cut this layer to the duration of your clip. Once that's done, we're gonna go to effects and presets and search for radial blur. There's lots of different ones. We don't want to use the BBC one. We're gonna use the standard radial blur and drag it on top of our adjustment layer. And to actually animate it, because we don't want to look like goofy CapCut editors, we're going to set a keyframe at the beginning of the adjustment layer for the amount. Depending on how much blur you want, you can change this value. If you go higher, you're going to get more blur, but in this case, I'm going to stick with 10. Then I'm going to press U, go to the end of the adjustment layer, and just put the value down to 0. Now we should have 2 keyframes that slowly animate it out, but right now it's going to look very slow. And we want it to look faster, so select both the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant, and then click easy ease. Open the graph editor, and depending on how fast you want your blur, you can adjust the graph. Because I like mine rather fast, I'm just going to drag this handle straight down a little bit over this line right here, and then I'm going to extend the right one a bit towards the left. Once that's done, we can just reuse the same adjustment layer on all of our other clips. So if you want to use this animation multiple times, just select the adjustment layer, press Ctrl and D to duplicate it, and then drag it ahead to the next clip. And then you will have this blur on all of your clips. The next effect is this nice race transition. You can literally make it with any color you like. Let me show you how to do it. So I have my clips ready, and the first thing I'm going to do is again create a new adjustment layer that we can apply the effect on top of. And similar to the blur transition, we're going to cut this layer 20 frames before and 20 frames after our clips cut. Delete the rest of the adjustment layer so that you're only left with this short snippet. The effect we want to apply here is called BBC Race Puffy. And if you can't find it inside of your After Effects, join my Discord server. Very important, drag it on top of the adjustment layer, and the standard settings will look really trash. The first thing we have to do is change the source of our light. As you can see right now, the rays are not coming from the center of the screen, they're a bit shifted towards the top right. And that's because if we click onto our light source, you can see it's actually all the way over here when it's supposed to be in the middle of our clip. To fix that, select your adjustment layer and press A on your keyboard. As you can see, we get our anchor point values, and these we just have to paste inside of our light source. For me, it's 540, so I'm just going to replace both of these values with 540, which as you can see will put our light source in the center of our screen. Next thing we want to do is make the lights a bit brighter, so we're going to put the intensity from 125 up to 250. And because I don't want the race to be too long, I'm going to put the length from 50 down to 25. As you can see, see, it looks way better now, but we don't want fucking orange. So what we're gonna do is click onto the tab that says current, and you can see there's a lot of different presets you can pick from. For example, blue if you want blue, or red if you want red. If you don't like the way of these presets, you can also open up the colorize option and pick your own colors inside of here. For me, it's a little bit too white, so I'm gonna select the color number 4 and just drag it a bit more towards the red side. Once you found the exact color settings you want to use, we're gonna move to the exact point where our clips are cutting and then set a keyframe for the intensity. Press U and leave this value how it is. Then we're gonna go to the beginning of the adjustment layer and put the intensity from 250 down to 0. Copy this keyframe by pressing Ctrl and C, and then also paste it at the end of this adjustment layer. To make it look smoother, we're also gonna adjust the graphs, so select the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant and click on easy ease. Open the graph editor, and what we wanna do is just drag these bottom handles towards the middle like this. Another thing I like to do when I use this transition is to combine it with the blur that we created earlier. You remember the Joe Goldberg clips? So I recommend using the same settings here as well. Just make sure that the layers are in the right order. The top layer should have the blur, the middle one should have the raise, and then right below that should be the shake layer. And like I said, adding a good color correction is one of the best things you can do for your edit. It will literally make your edits look so much better. And if you now want to get my exact color correction, make sure you check the first link in the description, because I'm still running a huge opportunity in my shop. Thanks to your guys' amazing feedback and support, you can still save an extra 10% on the already ongoing 70% sale by using the code SUMMER10. So if you want to go viral and upgrade the way your edits look, make sure you don't miss out on this limited time offer. The next and probably most impressive transition out of all is going to be this nice 3D camera transition. And to make it, I'm going to use 3 clips of Patrick Bateman right here. And because they're all going to be visible at the same time, we're going to have to make sure to overlap them like this. Once that's done, we're going to create our camera. So go to the top, click on layer, new, and then select camera. For the preset, choose 28mm and then press onto OK. To actually use the camera, we're also going to create null layers. So click on layer, new, and select the null object. Because I have 3 total layers, I'm going to duplicate this null object twice, so I have a total of 3. That way we can make the animations look way smoother. Before we start animating anything at all though, we have to make sure our camera knows where to get its movement from. So we're going to use the pick whip tool again and drag it onto our null object like this. Once we connected the camera to our first null object, we're going to connect the first null object to the second one like this. And then the second one we're going to connect to the final one just by dragging the pick whip tool again onto the top one. So the camera needs to be linked to the first null object, the first null object needs to be linked to the second one, and the second one needs to be linked to the third one. Then we're also going to enable motion blur for all of our layers and 3D layer, which is this cube right here. So click on that for all of your layers, including your clips and null objects. Once we're done with the setup, we're going to select the first null object and press P on our keyboard. Right click onto position and then separate the dimensions. Because we want our animation to start by zooming out from a clip, we're going to set keyframes for all of these and not change them at all. Then we're going to move ahead to the place where the first zoom out is supposed to be finished. And instead of using the scaling to zoom, we're going to use the Z position. Because as you can see, if I increase or decrease the Z position, our clips will be zooming in or out. And if your After Effects starts lagging, you can also put the resolution from full to quarter, which will make it look a bit more pixelated, but preview faster. Now I'm going to start by putting the first zoom out to negative 1500, which as you can see will make my pictures pretty small. And this will give us a solid space to work with and place our pictures. Because obviously right now they're still all placed in the same position, just overlapping each other. And because we want to create this 3D tunnel look, we're going to disable the view of the first layer. And then we're just going to work with this one for now. Press P on your keyboard. And as you can see, because we turned this into a 3D layer, we also have the Z position on here. So if you want to zoom this layer towards the camera, we're not going to change the scaling. We're going to change the Z position. For this layer, I'm going to go negative 1250, which as you can see, will place it closer towards our camera. And to still keep the first layer visible, we're also going to move this clip a bit towards the right. In my case, I'm going to go for around 1600, and you can see that we'll place it a bit towards the right. If you want to, you can also play around with the rotation. So press R and then just rotate it a bit towards the right. Now the reason why we created multiple null object layers is so that we can overlap these animations. So whilst the first one is zooming out, we can start with the second one already kind of panning towards the right and revealing our clip. Because as you can see right now, our second clip is not fully visible. So I'm going to move a few frames before this initial zoom out finishes, and then select my null object number 2 and press P on my keyboard. Again, right click and separate the dimensions and set keyframes for the current values. I'm also going to make my initial zoom just a tiny bit longer, and then I'm going to go roughly 30 frames to the right. In this place, we have to change the position for our null object 2 so that it reveals our second clip. Because I moved mine to the right, I'm just going to increase the position till it's fully visible. And at the same time, I'm still going to keep the zooming out motion of my camera going, so I'm going to zoom out even more like this. I'm also going to add some rotation keyframes because I rotated my clip, and then make sure it's in the center of the screen like that. And if you take a look at the current movement, you can see we start with the zoom out, and then once our second keyframe start, it starts shifting towards the right to reveal our second clip. I'm also going to make this animation last just a little bit longer by dragging these keyframes more to the right. And generally speaking, the more spaces in between your keyframes, the smoother your animation is going to look. If you go for a hard and fast look, then you want to put them closer together. And because we want to use 3 clips, we're going to now to enable the view of this one and then put it in front of the second one. So for this one, I'm going to put the Z position to roughly 2000, which will zoom it even more in than the current one. And because I don't want it to block the view like this when it's zooming out, I'm also going to move it more towards the left. And to keep it organized, we're also now going to use the third null object for the third clip. So again, make sure you overlap the keyframes a bit. I'm going to start about here, and then I'm going to press P on my keyboard while having the third null object layer selected. Right click onto the position and separate the dimensions. Set a keyframe and don't change the value at all. Then go ahead to where you want your third clip to be revealed. Let's say after about 2 seconds, and then just decrease the Z position further. You can see kind of the outlines of my clip. I just want it to be a little bit more zoomed out. Let's go for around -800. And of course, we're also going to decrease the X position so that it actually puts our clip in the center of the screen. Because I added this rotation to my second clip, I'm also going to add the keyframes here to put it straight. And because the clip seems a bit too far down, I'm also going to change the Y position to just move it a bit more up and put it exactly in the center of my screen. To finish this transition, we're going to have to zoom back into the clip because as you remember, we started with our clip zoomed in, it zooms out, and then we want to end up with this final clip. So go to where the animation is supposed to be finished, right here, and then just increase the Z position until the clip is fully covering your composition screen. If we play ahead now, you will see it looks like it's been made on CapCut because the graphs do not look smooth at all. So it's very important that you also find the right graph to use with this animation. Start off by just selecting all of the keyframes we just created, right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, and then Easy Ease. And I recommend using the exact same graph for all of these transitions, not switching up between them. I'm going to start at the very beginning with our first zoom out. Just select the keyframes, open the graph editor, and the graph we want to use here is the following. Just extend the handles towards the middle, so we're going to go about 50% here and then 50% here as well. Remember this shape, then close the graph editor, and now apply these graphs for all of the next animations as well. So we're going to start with a Z rotation, open the graph editor, and then copy the same graph. Just extend the handles towards the middle about the same way that you did in the first one, and continue this until you have applied this graph for all of your animations. Now you can see the animation looks way smoother with these graphs, but we're still missing something because our background is just a plain black. And to fix that, we're going to create a new solid layer. For the color, I'm going to select black and then press on OK. We don't want this black solid to cover all of our clips, so I'm going to press U to hide the keyframes and then just drag this all the way below our first clip. As you can see, nothing changed, but now we're going to get to the interesting part. Go to Effects and Presets and search for CC Particle World. Drag it on top of the solid layer we just created. And for now, I'm going to isolate this layer so I can fully focus on creating our background. For this, I recommend you put your resolution back up to full. And we're going to start by putting the birth rate from 2 up to 5. Then we're going to open the producer and change the radius X to 5 and also the radius Y to 5. As you can see, that will spread the particles across our screen. But because we don't want any unnecessary movement, we're going to open up the physics and then put the gravity from 0.5 down to 0. That means they will stay in one place and not fall down. The animation, I'm going to change from explosive to direction axis. And because I don't really like these lines, I think they look kind of boring, I'm going to open up the particle window. And for the particle type, instead of line, I'm going to select star. And to make it match with my character, I'm also going to put the color from yellow to a red. Also, the stars are a bit too average sized. And because I like it thick, I'm going to put the birth size from 0.25 up to 0.5. Now we can enable the other layers again. And if we look at the background, you can see we get these cool stars. And the cool thing about this effect is that it will automatically move in the same direction that your camera moves, as you can see. The next effect we're going to add is called Deep Glow. And if you can't find it inside of your After Effects, join my Discord server. Very important, drag it underneath of the CC Particle World effect and put the exposure from 1 down to 0.2. This will give us a little bit of a glow. And to make our pictures look a bit more realistic, we're going to search for Drop Shadow, drag it on top of the first layer, and then put the opacity from 50 to 100%, the distance from 5 to 0, and the softness from 0 to 250. Copy this effect by pressing Ctrl and C and paste it on the other clip layers as well. As you can see, this will give us this little shadow. And because I want my clips to look a little bit better, I'm also going to apply my color correction. And if all of this working with 3D cameras is too confusing for you, make sure you check out my school community, because in there I have a full step-by-step guide just about camera movement and everything else inside of After Effects. You also get 3 weekly live calls with me, but there's only a few spots left, so be quick. And if this video helped you, make sure you like and subscribe because it would really make my day. If you want to know how to make a full TikTok edit, watch this video next. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.